we are living in a guns of August moment right now when it comes to propaganda and manipulation. So we get so worried about that. It's like, oh, it's disinformation. I'm like, yeah, that happens, but it's actually not that effective. The real form of propaganda is false consensus. The ability with bots on social media, algorithmic manipulation, it's very easy for me to control what you believe your communities believe.
You just heard Todd Rose in a Part 2 interview, the CEO of Populace in Burlington, Massachusetts. Garth and special guest host Jane Halonen interviewed Todd for episode 225 of Psych Sessions, Conversations about Teaching and Stuff.
Psych Sessions is proud to partner with Macmillan Learning. At Macmillan Learning Psychology, content matters, and these days, digital content matters more than ever. Macmillan Learning's Achieve elevates interactive teaching and learning with an extraordinary range of online course content in a powerful yet easy-to-use platform. Interactive ebooks, innovative assessments, engaging videos and activities, helpful instructor resources. Achieve brings it all together and makes it easy for you to find what you need and what you want. See for yourself. Go to macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions for an introductory tour today. Macmillan's Achieve for Psychology, engaging every student, supporting every instructor, setting the new standard for teaching and learning. Psych Sessions is sponsored by W.W. Norton. Are you looking for more activities to promote scientific literacy? ZAPS 3.0 interactive labs from W.W. Norton are brief, hands-on activities that invite students to actively participate in the process of psychological research and discovery. Utilizing a consistent 5-part framework and incorporating transparent design principles, students experience classic psychological studies like the Stroop effect, false memory, the serial position effect, signal detection, and more. Once they've completed the experiment, students can compare their data with national data and their own classmates, offering the opportunity for rich in-class or online discussions. Bring the science of psychology to life for your students with ZAPS. For Psych Sessions listeners new to ZAPS, you can try it for free the next time you teach. Just go to siegel.wwnorton.com/psych sessions. And the folks at WW Norton will even integrate it into your LMS for you. That is Siegel, like the bird, SEAGULL.wwnorton.com/psych sessions.
Hi, my name is Brooke Wisenhunt, and I'm from Missouri State University. And one of the things that excites me about STP is that I feel like that is where I found my professional home. After spending a lot of years going to other professional academic conferences, I landed at a conference full of people from STP and really felt like this was the place that were my people. And I think that that's something that you can miss out on if you don't join this organization. So go to teachpsych.org and please join and become one of these people that is a member of our community.
Well, folks, we are back for another conversation with Todd Rose from Populace today. And if you haven't gone back to listen to part 1 of this interview, I believe it was episode 187. You're going to want to listen to that first. Todd Rose is an author, a former professor of psychology at Harvard University, and now runs a think tank called Populace that he co-founded and is still the CEO, Todd, of that?
I am.
Okay. All right. Last time we were there, and I'm saying we because I'm looking at my good friend Jane Halonen on the screen. We were in person in the Boston area to chat with Todd. So that was a couple of years ago. Jane, do you any takeaways from that time together where we were at the Populace offices? What sticks out to you?
I immediately went out and bought all 3 of Todd's books and read them. And I think that's one of the reasons that we were so eager to get him back, because there was this nice teaser in the first interview where we started talking about education, and that's just such a wide open field. So I'm really glad that we have this second opportunity.
Me too.
Yeah. So welcome, Todd.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
What have you been? I've been looking just to see if you're writing anything that I'm going to be reading. It's going to be on my nightstand soon, but it sounds like maybe that would be a side project at this point.
Yeah, it's been, I've always used commercial books just to advance ideas that are important to the broader paradigm we care about. And, I've got plenty of other ideas, but right now, collective illusions and private opinion are just sort of having a moment, and you don't want to kind of step on that. So we're just really investing a lot of the time and energy in running that all the way down rather than going back to writing.
Right. Well, Collective Illusions is your third and most recent book. Folks, it's awesome. Please have a look at it and go to populace.com if you want to check out his other stuff. But he wrote two other books, Dark Horses and The End of Average. And I think I read those in order, Todd. And what would you say if you had to look across those three books? What are the themes that stick out to you? Because, I think there are themes, but I'd like to hear it from you.
I think that one of the fundamental themes is my deep belief in the value and power of human distinctiveness, not as selfishness, but as we all have something unique to contribute to the world. And that I believe deeply that societies thrive when we recognize that, we invest in that, we make space for that. And so, End of Average was, a lot of these are just the obstacles. They're really books trying to remove the obstacles to converting human distinctiveness into collective flourishing. And End of Average was like, well, look, if you believe in averages, then we're kind of in trouble, right? Then we get stuck into this sort of factory model of society, which serves some role, but definitely isn't helping us right now. You move to Dark Horse, which, if you think about it, is there's a wonky economic term called subjective value, right? Which is we are distinct in even the value we attach to certain things. And it's well, wait, it's why, what makes markets work, right? If we all valued the exact same things the same way, then our exchanges together couldn't be mutually beneficial, right? Someone would actually always have to lose. But so I felt like extending individuality from End of Average into the way we think about what a good life is and the way we choose to pursue that. And then, obviously, what good is our distinctiveness if we can't express it? And we can express it in our contributions, but also in our opinions. And, Collective Illusions is about, I think, the biggest threat, biggest invisible threat to self-expression that exists right now, which is this ability to create false consensus using our social technologies, which then weaponize our need to belong against us. And then we all fall silent. We start to lie about our views, and it just corrupts not only the lives we want to live, but it starts to corrupt the trust we have in each other, our ability to cooperate, our ability to do things together. And I think we're all sort of living in the sort of darkest parts of that right now.
Yeah, I agree. And hopefully we can get to some of that specifically. And I want to backtrack to what we covered, Jane, in part one with Todd in that first interview, because I think there are some things that he even just talked about here as he ran us through those kind of the content of those three books or the themes of those three books. But we are educators and we have this educator audience. And Jane, I know you got real excited about some of the ideas or problems in higher education.
Quite a lot of the ideas, actually.
Right. So here we go. We've got Todd in the hot seat. What do we want? What do we want to know?
I want to know if we are embracing the idea of the jagged profile, which, I love that concept. I think that so captures the distinctiveness, and I'm going to use your phrase, the human distinctiveness of the individuals that we're dealing with in the classroom. what are the practical implications of that for people who are trying to design really good learning experiences? And I know that's a kind of a loaded question, because maybe that's easy to pull off if you have a class of 10, but many of our listeners are people who have classes of over 100 people. And that kind of factory setup of education does not lend itself very well. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how you would approach implementing the jagged profile in curriculum planning or hiring.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Oh, I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, thanks. And so we can co-construct this answer too. I'll give you my opinion, but I'd love to hear yours as well. So there's a handful of things that seem kind of basic, but if we start with this jaggedness idea, well, what's nice is it means that, like, while we're all distinct in the final analysis, right? So, like, in my sum total, I'm unlike anyone else. We're still like other people in some ways, right? And so a lot of what's great about human individuality is some of it's qualitative, and there's not much you can do. I can't anticipate that, but some of it's quantitative and systematic. And if that's true, then it can be designed for. And so, like, let's just take the curriculum itself and the content. Like, we're so used to thinking about from K-12 to higher ed, we have the material. There was a medium that we delivered it most of the time, which was textbooks and things like that. Okay, great. But back in the day, when you had to scale that, you had to make decisions about not only examples that go in, but even basic things like the reading level of the material. And you could only choose one, and you had to do that. So you had to make your best guess, right? So we'd call it, like, in K-12, it'd be like age appropriate, things like that. Okay. But, like, at any given time, people are going to vary pretty dramatically in those skills. And we now, as we move more into digital, it's so funny how we just copied over that same mentality. Like, think about what we started doing. At first, it was like, well, now we have PDFs. And you're like, okay, like a lightweight portable version of the thing we had, like, not understanding that the real power of digital technologies is their ability to scale flexibility. So, like, it's so easy. And we did some of this in my sort of previous life of embedding this in a lot of curricular stuff where, like, you can literally have adaptive language support, adaptive vocabulary support. You can provide multiple examples of things all embedded in it. And it doesn't even occur to you that that would be really valuable if you don't appreciate this jaggedness principle. So the first thing I do is I'd say, look, the people that are being paid to create the stuff that we all end up having to use should be responsible for designing flexibility into it from the jump. Okay, so, like, as something as simple as that, it'll be remarkable, like, how much value is added to the learning experience in that classroom. And to your point, it's like, yeah, if you had 10 kids, it's one thing, but, like, that's not reality. So we need the curricular materials themselves to carry a little bit more of that weight. The second thing is the temporal aspect of learning. So we can start with I think, inarguable fact that people differ in the pace and sequence of how they learn. Now, that doesn't mean we have unlimited time. We don't. But, you know, when you look at a lot of the mastery learning literature, at least my read on it, is like, even when you add, say, 25% more time of total time, but you allow an individual to have a little bit more pace flexibility, like, it's pretty remarkable, like, what they're able to accomplish. Moreover, when you're in these more mastery-oriented environments, the spread of how much time kids need to learn, the initial time one has the highest spread. But the longer they're in a mastery environment, the more homogeneous they become because it's not terribly surprising, right? Like, the best predictor of how much time you're going to need to learn is how well you knew the concepts that are prerequisites. So anyway, so I think if you go flexible design, you do a little bit more flexibility in the sort of pace and sequence. Again, not unlimited. But I also think, like, at the end of the day, thinking more about a responsible use of autonomy in this, like, again, it's not Lord of the Flies, it's not do whatever you want, but I'll tell you an example because I'm only telling you stories where I'm the hero. So here we go. No, but one of the things when I was teaching at Harvard, I had created, which was one of the first classes on educational neuroscience ever, and things back in the day. And for me, it was really important that that anyone take it, right? Like I wanted it, just whether you had a background in neuroscience or not. And I had actually my co-founder. This is probably cut me off if this is too long. I'm sorry, but I met my co-founder of Populace, Parisa Rahani. She was at Harvard as well, and I'd created this class, but it had gotten so big and so diverse. Like we literally had like medical doctors taking it and people in like theology that had never taken a biology class in their life in the same classroom, which I loved. It was amazing. But it was getting to be like 130 people, which is kind of big, right? Like it was maybe not like it was big for me. And I was like, I don't know that. How do I keep the rigor there, create quality experiences with this much? It was so Parisa was the dean's office. She was a presidential instructional technology fellow. And they said, well, we know the person that you're going to want. So we took these ideas and redesigned the curriculum. You made use of the technology, like I said before, developed content that you could learn from as prerequisite. But one of the things that was such an unlock for the experience was how did we maintain relevance for people? And we had gone to like project kind of learning, but one of the real unlocks for us was rather than tell them what the assignments were going to be, and this is not revolutionary, this is why I'm sharing it, but it was like, well, wait a minute, what if we had them to spend a lot of time with them to discover something they were passionate about for which they will apply the insights from this class to? Again, not rocket science, lots of people do that. But it was so incredible because we would then build rubrics to make sure we had equivalence in terms of grading. But we literally would say, look, the topic will be yours as long as it's makes sense. And the medium through which you will demonstrate this knowledge would be flexible. And we said, as long as we can develop a rubric, we will let you do it. If we can't, we can't. We could never figure out like interpretive dance or something. That was not an easy way. But the remarkable thing was, first of all, how many Harvard students thought this was like, you're just lowering the bar, right? Because you're so used to like the medium of writing a paper as if it's somehow a priori like a better medium. It's like, no, that's first of all, you're good at that. So you think it's the right way to do it. And when I let someone do like a visual presentation and that's like, oh, that's not as rigorous. So one thing I did for fun, I got in trouble was one year just to make a point for the class. I said up front, you can do any medium you want, except for you can't write a paper. And I had students literally go to the dean's office and complain. And I was like, I was just kidding. But look how you literally think I just like the most unfair thing in the world when I took away your best medium of expression. And I had this one moment, and I promise I'll shut up. I knew this to be true intellectually, that this was a better way to create, even in a traditional higher ed environment, that I could use that understanding of individuality to create a better experience. But I had this student that I'll just never forget. So she had profound anxiety, like social anxiety. And she chose to do the paper on anxiety. So,
no surprise there.
It's just, she had done this remarkable job. She actually reached out to Robert Sapolsky, Stanford, and he had responded, and they had this chain of anyway. But she chose to do this dynamic visual presentation. Like, so she was a little bit of a pain in the rear, I'll be honest, like, always asking for more time on things. So, but toward the end of the semester, she reached out and said, I just need to meet. And I thought, okay, she's going to come ask for more time and we'll try to figure out what we can do. She gets there and she shows me what she's done. And it like blew my mind. It was so cool. It was so good. And she made full use of this dynamic, interactual, visual presentation in a way that communicated ideas that you couldn't in a linear writing thing. And she shows it to me and she said, okay, what else what do I need to do? And I just said, listen, I've never done this before, but I'm gonna tell you right now, nothing. Like, I'm gonna go ahead and circumvent my teaching fellows. This is not only is it an A project, I want to use this as an exemplar. And she started crying and she said, I can't be done because I haven't cried myself to sleep. And I said, like, what do you mean? And she said, it was so hard in her mind to take all these nonlinear ideas and try to funnel them into this very linear structure of a written assignment. It was so torturous that for as long as she could remember, all the way back to high school, every assignment ended in tears, that she felt like it had to be painful or it wasn't done. And, I just thought we'd internalize this where it had to be painful because the medium mismatch to my individuality was such that that's just the way it is. And she was brute forcing it through everything. And I just thought, we just got like a remarkable display of understanding that was unlocked because we gave just a little bit of flexibility in the way that she was able to demonstrate knowledge. So that for me was like, I just couldn't believe it. So when we think about these things, that combination of flexible design, trying to find ways where the temporal flexibility can be embedded within practical reasons, and then just thinking about things that we differ in how we take in information. So we designed it. We differ in what we are engaged by. So trying to invert that, which a lot of professors do, right? Help you figure out the thing you care about, and then I can guarantee relevance on this. And then third, that flexibility in the way people differ in how they demonstrate understanding. And, granted, like, I'll be the first to say, I mean, at Harvard, we had a lot of resources and there were things that wouldn't have been possible when I was teaching at Weber State after my degree. Like that, that's fine. But I do think that we do have access to these technologies that allow that stuff to be implemented at scale.
Okay, so a very practical follow-up question would be, in this course, was there one rubric that applied to all different modes, or did you create a rubric for each different mode, or how did you deal with that?
That's a really great question. So we felt like it was important to have equivalence. And so we had a sort of meta rubric of like really getting at what it is that they had to demonstrate, what would it look like. And then what we could do is we'd say, look, you come to us with the topic, and they'd be working with a teaching fellow, can we support that topic? Can we not? And then we would then say, okay, it's our job to figure out whether we can build the equivalent rubric. So we would ask them for a week, and it would say, and to be fair, like there are certain things where we just can't, and it's not fair to the other students, right? If they're being graded on something very, very different. But it was pretty remarkable taking one meta sort of rubric and then saying, okay, but what does that look like in this medium? And then what we found is there aren't like infinite numbers of mediums, right? There's so it turned out after a couple of years, it got to the point where we weren't creating new rubrics. It was like, some people are going to do this kind of presentation. Some people are going to do this kind of thing. Somebody does this. And it's like, we had it done. And the things that got unlocked, I'll tell you one other one that was just blew my mind. We had a special forces soldier who had come back, and he was the military had sent him to graduate school. And his view was that the way we train special forces was so backwards. It's just like beat them up to the point where, well, you didn't die, so you're trained. And he's like, that doesn't even reflect the reality of the world that these special forces soldiers operate in, which is so much more about uncertainty now than it is about being able to endure like misery. And he's like, one day I would be in like urban combat in a city, and then I'm in like the desert, and I'm like, the ability to deal with uncertainty. But he's like, no one dares to touch that, because anyone that challenges how it's trained would be like, oh, you're just trying to soften, da 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 da. So he decides to do this whole project on this, and it went so well that a 4-star general took it up and they got published together, and it actually materially changed over time how special forces are trained. And I'm like, I'm just seeing all this just genius, this amazing stuff coming out, and I'm like, not clear to me that I would have got that if I hadn't thought about things this way.
Sometimes people think rubrics drive the design to the center. Like you're really organizing a rubric to get minimum standards. And do you have an argument?
I don't think so. I think that this is a kind of an important thing. Like, obviously, because I care about individuality, I am not the biggest fan of standardization. Like, I don't think we should standardize people. But one of the things that I didn't say in End of Average that if I could change it, I would. Go back to, I used that Air Force example where, hey, okay, great. Create flexibility in a cockpit and suddenly all kinds of cool things happen. What I don't think I said, I should probably go reread my books, but is what they did standardize is the instrument panel display. Like, because it's actually really good that like airspeed is always top right, no matter which plane you're flying in, no matter which, it's to let that vary would just create performance degradation. So it's like understanding what things we standardize and what things we don't. And to me, if I don't have a standard way by which we can judge performance, then I don't know what we're doing. And I really worry that in a rush to get rid of bell curve kinds of assessments, which I would be the first to scrap tomorrow because I don't care about the comparative nature of them, that does not mean we don't need standardized stuff that's against a standard, like the standard benchmark knowledge. So to me, I actually think that, yeah, we can do rubrics poorly for sure, right? I actually found the exercise of trying to build rubrics with my team, a rubric that was independent of the medium, which is really what a rubric should be, right? But we tend to get hung up on the particular medium. An easier way to not have it be a sort of conspiracy of mediocrity, right? Where we're just, but yeah, I would come firmly down on the side of, listen, no, you definitely need these, and they're not a force to the middle if you do it right.
I've always found too that if I do a lot of my design through rubrics, but if I include a direction in the rubric that evaluates how creative you are, usually that makes students go, what? It's like, you want me to be creative? And it's, yeah, this is just a basic blueprint. Now show me your innards. Show me what you got and make That's it really creative. Cool. Make me smile.
I love that.
Yeah.
I have to steal that someday.
Go right ahead. My pleasure.
Jane sometimes gets students bringing guitars in and singing songs as part of her positive psych class because they choose to be creative in that way. It's pretty cool. When you were talking about the cockpit and just making sure that certain like measures are, in the same place in front of the pilot. I was just thinking about my daughter who's 12 years old, who started middle school, 7th grade this year. And I've used a Canvas learning management system with my college students for, 15 years or something like that. And her middle school uses Canvas, except, my students, we're in a quarter system here. So they have 3 classes. Full-time student would have 3 classes per quarter. And she, in her middle school, instead of being in one classroom like we were in elementary school, now she's going to like 6 different classes, and they all have Canvas pages. And none of the instruments are in the same place in the cockpit, right? So that's what, to me, always needs to be standardized. And so I kind of had this suspicion, we're so separated from other people in higher ed that we just get to do whatever we want, and we're using the system or whatever. But how we use the system, nobody really asks. There's no best practices about how to use the system, or maybe there is, but nobody's really following them. And so when I saw her as a parent trying to keep track with her, what was going on was really, really difficult. And it gave me a lot more empathy for my students who and it made me really want to not only clean up my Canvas courses, but also talk to my colleagues about it. And then I thought, why isn't the college like spotting these kinds of things that would make just the basics easier for students? We talk about equity, but I want my students to just have a fair foundation for learning, because I've seen it in my daughter. And here's kind of the end of that story is she's 9 months through, or 3/4 of the way through 7th grade now. And at the beginning of, a couple months in, she was like pulling C's, which is fine. I mean, we'd work with her if she wanted to do, if she was doing C's, that's fine. But it was, I believe it now she's like up to A's, and we didn't really force her to do that, but it was her trying to get familiar with, what's going on in these classes. Now, I guess that's a skill, but I don't think that's the kind of skill. I'd rather have her learning the content of the courses, right?
Right. So you think about like, it's such a difference between like the productive struggle and the unproductive struggle. And like there should be a bit of struggle, like when I'm grappling with stuff, but it's like, oh, I'm sorry, you got a C. Well, okay. So part of that C, we're like, oh, so you don't understand the concepts. Like, no, I don't understand how to navigate like,
the system. Yeah.
Like, okay. Like maybe we should think that it's so true. It's like, I just think it's like, once you, like, I always like to think of us, like I never liked, no, let me rephrase this. I was going to say I never liked my law school colleagues. I do. I like my law school colleagues. I didn't like the mentality of like, like these curved classes where it's like, they're like, my job is to be as hard as I can, either a weeder class, right? That my job is to make you hate this material and we'll see who survives. I'm like, you should find another career. Okay. Or yeah, we've got this, we grade on a curve. So some of you are always going to fail. And I'm like, this is a cop-out. Both of those are cop-outs because our job is to educate. Our job is to believe that everybody in front of us is capable and do our part in doing whatever we can to allow them to have the fairest shot at learning and demonstrating what they know. And I think that like, as you know, like, I think that's how a lot of teachers really do think. But it's a little shocking sometimes when, you see these people are like, nope, my job is to try to make you hate this material. You're like, okay.
They're not teachers, they're gatekeepers.
That's exactly right. And I think that like, and I don't understand like what sadistic kind of motivation leads you to be like, I want to go into this business to make people hate the thing that, like, I remember like organic chemistry was that for me. Like, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. It's the only, like, I was so poor in college and you'd immediately want to sell your books back to get money. And you never got very much money. It's like, are you kidding me? Like the depreciation on those books makes new cars feel like a good deal. But organic chemistry was the only book, it's the only book I've ever burnt in my life. I was like, I needed the therapeutic release. I was like, I am not selling this back. I am burning this thing.
Well, I have to say the rationale of chemistry faculty that I've worked with in an administrative capacity is, well, we have to be gatekeepers because these people are going to become doctors and they're going to take care of your health. We don't want the crappy thinkers out there ruining you. It's like, I don't think you understand what your job is.
No, exactly. It's like, no, I agree. We don't want like crappy people. It's like, but just because you can endure torture doesn't make you a person that can kill other people.
So Todd, your ideas in your books and just listening to you speak, they have really changed the way that I approach the people I speak to, but also my classes. And I felt like just something kind of came alive and really identified with some of the things that you talk about with like individuality, with thriving, with there's something wrong with the pipeline that we are for me, the pipeline that we're putting students through and how we're getting them into the workforce. Some of that's necessary, I'm sure. But here's my question, and you can take this wherever you want. You can answer any part of that. If you want to address any part of that, that's fine. But my question is, I'm on a quarter system. And so that means in a week, I'm going to stand in front of a brand new classroom, actually a couple of them. How would you help undergraduates, or what would you say to an undergraduate class, a pretty diverse undergraduate class, to set the expectation for learning from this sort of jaggedness, individual sort of perspective? What would you like them to know?
So I think that it's twofold, right? Like, I think, there's a bit of a contract that we're making together, right? Like, you've done things that you can to actually create a prepared environment, if I could steal from Maria Montessori, right? Like, but ultimately, if we take individuality seriously, nobody should know you better than you know yourself. And there is a responsibility. Like environments that have this flexibility are only better when me as a learner actually takes responsibility and realizes like more choices only are better if I know how to make choices. And so I think that we've done a pretty poor job in our education system writ large of helping people discover who they are. And I just think there was no place for it, right? Like in a sort of Frederick Taylor kind of scientific management factory system, like what's the point? Like, we're going to try to figure out what your value is to society. We're going to give you the skills you need. We're going to put you into the workforce. Fine. But, I think of, this will be a pretty obvious statement, but I think it has pretty important implications. Like this question of individuality or not, and like what we're doing here in higher education, we all know that AI is doing something, right? And it's like, it's almost talked about so much that we're kind of like, oh, AI, but it is going to fundamentally change society. And it's like, those things can become like the oracle that end up doing things to you and for you, or they can be technologies that are harnessed for greater human creativity and productivity. But like, you need to learn how to, this sounds so obvious, but I've never been more bullish on liberal arts education than I am right now. Like, we worry about the future of higher ed. We should be worried when we got lazy and soft because we were the gatekeepers of all opportunity. But the reality is that the economy is going to change fundamentally. Society is changing fundamentally. We're living through that right now. We can all feel it. And those technologies that are driving that change are going to create an incredible premium on people with self-knowledge and who am I? What are my gifts? And do I have the knowledge, know-how to be able to convert that into some kind of contribution? And so I would say, this is a long wind-up way of saying, sitting there in a class right now, realizing that the real opportunity that you have is, yes, the content, but also the exercise of learning those things we just talked about. And, we should have done right by you all the way to K-12. That probably wasn't the case, but that doesn't mean that it can't be the case right now. And that, really appreciating that prepared environment and learning that like the things that you're going to acquire in that experience are going to serve you well. And like, quite honestly, like, again, what I think prepared means now is very different. You can get your diploma, but I don't like, but if you learn these things right now, you are going to be positioned in such a way that what's coming is actually going to be quite good for you. I don't think it's neutral. I think it's these kind of bifurcating technologies that change society in such profound ways. Either you're prepared for it and it's great, or you just get swamped by it.
Well, let's throw in one other disruptive force, which is the tendency that faculty are now dealing with students who demonstrate a lot of privileged attitudes. And sometimes the privilege extends to, I have social anxiety, so I think you should exempt me from this speaking requirement. How might that fit in with trying to accommodate a jaggedy profile?
I think that's a really, really good question, because if we're not careful, this concept of individuality does become a conspiracy of mediocrity, right? Like where it becomes an excuse rather than an understanding. Like, so to me, we always asked ourselves, and we got this a lot too with students. It's, when that gets presented, we'd always stop and think, okay, do they have a point? Like, and by that, I just mean, is the thing that we're asking of them truly goal relevant, right? Is it, or is it just, because it's the way we've done it, and I will admit, sometimes on our end, it was like, oh, wow, we really can't justify why we're having them stand up in front of class, right? But if it is goal relevant, then your social anxiety is not, and I don't mean this insensitively, it's not an excuse to not have to develop these skills, do these things. We can talk about a lot of the skills and strategies that can be acquired that actually allow you to do things that aren't comfortable. And there are whole books on that, right? And so I think, when people start to use that as like, well, I can't, then we're training a mindset that is decidedly unproductive. And I do think, again, the alternative is to give them the idea of like, okay, well, let's think about what those strategies are and the things that need to allow you to rise to that occasion.
And what better context to do that than in a psychology class?
Right. And, and I noticed with you, like you said, you thought like positive psychology, right? Which is, my favorite kind of psychology. Because as a quick aside, I think we might have talked about this last time, but like I am obsessed about paradigms and paradigm shifts. And that's why we exist as an entity. I think what's on the horizon for America, if we get this right, is a new paradigm that is the marrying of liberalism with humanism. And that we now have the technology, we have the know-how to have a society, not just of material abundance, but psychological abundance as well. And so, yeah, everyone, pile into the positive psychology classes. This is what we have to know.
Absolutely.
Well, sometimes it's a little bit hard to be all that positive because of the political environment surrounding education right now. Sorry to bum up, but yeah, things are a little bit rugged out there currently.
And I feel like it's sort of half unfair and half we kind of brought it on ourselves, and we've got to merit it. You know what I mean? Like I'll just cards on the table. Like, while I don't like the response, I think it's ridiculous. And I think the secondary consequences on free speech and other things are just like going to be awful. Just count me as someone who watched some of the protests occurring on campuses and the way in which we allowed, like at Columbia, like you can't take a janitor hostage. You can't occupy, but you can't disrupt other people's ability to learn, no matter what you think your cause is. And I just, like, it was pretty startling to me, to be perfectly honest. I remember before all of this happened, before like October 7th with Israel, I'm talking to a Jewish friend who was so worried about it. I thought, really? Like, anti-Semitism? Like, that's a thing? Like, I was but so I think that, the thing I'm the most terrified about right now with higher ed is so much of our ability to do all the good work that higher ed does and the incredible contributions to society that institution has made and can continue to make depends on the trust of the public. And, we've seen in, say, journalism, when journalists became activists, they lost the trust of the public, even amongst the people who believed in the thing that they were activists for. It's just like when I know, and I just worry a lot that that rightly or wrongly, the perception is that higher ed has an agenda, and that agenda is not the educating of minds. And again, I think we all know that is way overblown, like way overblown. Like it just that happens mainly in like some of the humanities departments, but that's fine. Like they're good people. But it almost doesn't matter, right? I've been really excited to see some of the universities come back to the University of Chicago's approach to like study neutrality. And that doesn't mean we don't have values. It just means that when a university puts its thumb on the scale, it stifles the plurality of opinions and values that should exist on any healthy campus. So I think there's some healing there. My hope is that some of the absolute craziness that's happening in response doesn't, hopefully it's like we can learn from that. I do fear like it's almost like the response to the response is going to be worse than the thing itself. But anyway, I think, for me, there's a sort of reckoning and a paradigm crisis in higher ed as it is, right? Like, what's its purpose? What are we supposed to do? I have a lot of faith. Like, so I was saying, coming back to liberal arts education, it's like sort of ironically or unironically, the effects of these new technologies has been to reveal the value of our humanity. And just like the deeper we studied human individuality, the more we saw how connected we are to each other, right? Like, that's the funny thing. The deeper we went in individuality, and the science of individuality did not reveal an isolated individual. It revealed a deeply social, connected human being. And I think the same thing, right? So it's like, let's get our sea legs back and remember that there's a lot of value that we have to offer as an institution.
So I think Jane's in Florida and I'm in Washington State. So we have very different higher ed experiences right now.
Oh God, yes, we do.
But what's my question? Okay, I'm just going to fast forward to this question. Todd, you have been looking a lot into people's kind of secret attitudes about things and beliefs. I know you've been doing that for a number of years. Where has that gone? And how, like, what should we know? We get to talk to hundreds or thousands of students. We get to give talks to faculty colleagues around, the coffee maker, but also kind of in more formal ways. What should we tell them about what you're finding?
So I think, so we do this private opinion research. It's probably what we're most famous for now, and it's completely accidental. Like, we just need an accurate understanding of people to do the work we want to do. And it was pretty clear people aren't telling the truth. The latest one we did, the social pressure index, we looked at, it was just massive. It was ridiculously, like, it was 60 some odd of the most sensitive issues in the country. Looked at like people's public views on there and then their private views and the methodologies. And we could always go wonky on that if you want, but they're very, very good. We didn't invent them. But they're good at getting you to say what you want to say, but don't feel like you can. And what's really shocking to me is just the extent of the lying. Like, everybody, like, we're talking close to 2/3 of Americans openly admit that they have self-silenced in the past year. Like, meaning I did not share something I actually really believe and wanted to say for either fear or I didn't want to be rude or whatever. That is not a way for a democracy to function. It is a way for fringe elements to end up hijacking a democracy and controlling the narrative. So I would say, first of all, this is like a plague at our doorstep. Like, we are like, it's infected our culture. We have a self-silencing culture right now that is really dangerous. And I believe, and I don't know if I mentioned this last time or not, but, with the concept of collective illusions, which we said, like, it's just pluralistic ignorance, but you got to give it a better, got a better name than that. With our social media technologies, this kind of collective illusion, the ability to manufacture a false consensus, is what propaganda is now. Like, I don't know if you remember, there's a book called The Guns of August by historian Barbara Tuchman about World War I. And one of the key insights there was like why it was so awful was that the technology for war had changed almost exponentially, but the mindset around war had not. And so we were digging trenches, fighting over small amounts of land. But now instead of muskets or whatever, I'm sure we had better than muskets then, but we now had machine guns, even chemical weapons, stuff like this. I think we are living in a Guns of August moment right now when it comes to propaganda and manipulation. So we get so worried about that. It's it's disinformation. I'm yeah, that happens, but it's actually not that effective. The real form of propaganda is false consensus. The ability with bots on social media, algorithmic manipulation, it's very easy for me to control what you believe your communities believe. And when I can do that, I can get your conformity bias to kick in, and people will do and say a lot of things that they don't privately think. And, since we last spoke, we've ended up doing a lot of work on this. Some of it came off of, and I'll just share with you, I haven't really been really public about this, but after October 7th, I actually got asked to go. I went to Israel 6 weeks later because they had uncovered some intentional manipulation of TikTok to drive anti-Semitic content. Now, I'm not making any political, just but it was true. And there's a reason for it. And you could end up getting people that don't really know anything to be well, this is what we believe. And now suddenly they're just pouring out into these protests. And again, I want to make a clear distinction between protesting at the loss of lives of innocent women and children. And I think there's every right to. But I'm talking about easily getting young people to come out in support of Hamas. What are we doing? This is, and so, there was a Harvard Harris poll shortly after October 7th that said 60% of Gen Z thought Hamas was justified. So not this, Hamas was justified. And that's pretty terrifying if it's true. Turns out in private, it was 9%. So it was a massive collective illusion. They were and so what we found is not only did we discover that the algorithms of TikTok were being manipulated to drive anti-Semitic content, but that foreign actors, Iran, Russia, China, have massive bot farms. I'm talking hundreds of thousands of bots across every social media platform, all engineered to manufacture false consensus. And so that's happening all across the board. We've got engaged with a bunch of other partnerships to start to do something about that, because it's just, I want people to know you're being manipulated. Okay, so, you think you know what your group believes, you're probably wrong. And that perception was probably manufactured by a vocal fringe or a bad actor who is trying to get you to do and say things that you would have never done on your own. And that into this brave new world, the most important thing that you can preserve is your critical thinking and your honest voice. And so, for me, that's the point of education. That's what we should be doing, is creating those spaces where people learn to have those uncomfortable conversations, to speak up. And I do think we've fallen down a bit on that responsibility. But the other thing I would say is, we have more private opinion data on the American public than anybody. I'm quite confident of that. And it's when you get past the veneer of public opinion and the incredible polarization that you see there, under the hood, it is a completely different story. It is shocking to me how common we are as a people in the things that matter most when we get past what we're willing to say publicly and get at what we really believe. Now, it doesn't really matter if we don't solve that, because collective illusions become self-fulfilling prophecies. And so it's both scary right now because of that world we live in and this kind of propaganda, but also hopeful because the ground truth of it all is so much better. And that every one of us has a role to play, because when we sit under collective illusions, only the people themselves can shadow them because we're the ones propagating it. And so the remarkable ability for everyday people to just be able to say, look, I'm not going to go silent. I don't have to be a jerk about it, but there are ways to respectfully maintain your integrity and your beliefs and put those forward. The amount of good that you can do by creating a cascade effects where more people speak up, the better. And so like I said, I'm both terrified by it and hopeful at the same time, which is kind of a weird place to be, but.
Well, we knew you were hopeful. That's, that's a theme. Jane, what else do we want to ask Todd while we have him here, just for a few more minutes? I don't know, Todd, it sounds like you've got a pretty busy day going on, and so we don't want to keep you too long, but maybe if we could have you for another 5 or so, would that be all right?
I've got 25 more minutes.
Okay. Well, good. We'll take some of it.
Great.
So Jane, I think Todd hit on a lot. What was intriguing to you there, particularly in our role as educators, and in the world, not only with our students, but with the institution, with colleagues? What do you think about when you hear that?
Well, I would first say that one of the things I most admire about the brain behind collective illusions is you're absolutely eloquent in how you express yourself. And even out of the conversation that you've given us in this brief hour, I'm impressed that you've given me some new concepts that help me deal in a bridge-making way between the polarities politically. Specifically, right now, I'm in Florida, and life's a little tough currently, but part of what we're up against is movements about, here are the things you can't say. And I think social science moved in the direction of the term intersectionality to get at layers of individuality, and that raises all kinds of flags politically, when in fact human distinctiveness is something that would appeal to both ends of the pole. So I think I just admire your capacity and spirit to be able to see, yes, we're on the brink of something. I've been referring to this as, here we are, another year of disruption. Oh, goody. But to be able to see this as something that very likely could have a positive outcome if we understood what's under the hood. And how do we get to those conversations? So I really appreciate that, and was doing a little catalog in my mind about how much suppression have I been experiencing about the things that I believe, especially if I'm surrounded with people who don't believe in the same way that I do. I have to say I've experienced that, and that does not make me proud, but the stance that you take and how you express yourself is just so inspiring.
That really means a lot to me. And I do think that, like, the moment calls for a bit of humility and like, I like my friend Tim Shriver. So I'm gonna give him credit because he runs the Special Olympics and does amazing things. So I want to give him credit for this, but it was a real profound thing for me. And he said, it's not our differences that are the problem; it's our contempt for one another. And I think that's exactly right. That we've been led to a place by people who profit from this contempt, and they do, because they know that their ideas would have no purchase on the American public if we were just able to respect one another and have conversations. So the silence, the feeling like I can't even tell you what I think is intentional for them. It's beneficial for them. It's such a small group. And if we can get back to, like, in our private opinion research, people do not want unity. They don't need that. They see that as false agreement. What they want deeply, more than anything, is to get back to treating one another with respect. That basic human dignity of, and I think, we can model that in our classes, right? Like there are values that we stand for, and we should be clear about them. But like I told every student coming into my class, you don't have a right to be comfortable, but you do have a right to be respected. And that sense of I don't feel safe. Well, listen, if you don't physically feel safe because you're being threatened, that's one thing. If you feel uncomfortable because your beliefs are being challenged, that is the point. And but there is a right way and a wrong way to actually challenge those views. And so I do think that, like, I just think I'm excited because, again, when you look under the hood of it, it's just like we're actually a pretty good people. It doesn't seem like it right now. Like, but you know what's funny is, as you know, with the brain, and like you can, when things start being oriented around fear, people start to do really crazy things.
What I love about that stance is you're really addressing trying to get back to authentic living. Yeah. And when you're suppressing, you're adding layers between you and other people, and you're clearly not living in that ideal of humanism. So I think that is, again, very meaningful when we're looking at molding minds.
That's right. And, you know, I was just rereading Carl Rogers recently because I do believe the humanistic psychology has so much to tell us about the moment we're in. And, you know, he really grappled with, like, how do you think about the basic, like, dignity of people and this need to, what he called needing an identity worthy of our humanity. And, you know, we didn't really make much progress on the identity front between his time and now, where we have identities that seem to force us into these tribal sort of battles. But I do think that, you know, the humanistic psychology angle of, like you said, this self-expression being so fundamental, right? And that's why I love when I said marrying the humanism and the liberalism is, you know, so much about liberalism was about, you know, our political systems and our economic systems, and it works really well. But it does lack the humanity that it's. I don't mean that as a critique so much as just it is what it is, right? We're really good at making more stuff.
Yes, we are.
But our ability to recover, what was the point of all that stuff? And I just think, you know, I'm excited because when I think about what I know about the American public in private, and I think this is where people want to go, but right now they're deeply afraid, and that fear makes us all uglier, meaner. You know, we more zero sum in our thinking, but it doesn't take much. And this is why I'm excited. You know, we have a partnership and playing a role in this big national event around the America's 250th next year. And for us and our over 100 partners, it's really about American identity. Like, who are we as a people? What do we value? And I think that's a really, really great opportunity to help reveal, like, who we are and get back on track, because I think a lot of people, they don't know anymore, right? What does it mean to be an American, right? So
yeah. I have, I'll see if I can remember both of them, but two things that are coming up for me. This week I was meeting with a friend of mine. He's 60. He's a coach. He's a lawyer. He's retired now, and now he's coach. He fell into this coaching thing. He does it for the love of it. He doesn't need the money. And he was telling me how shocked he was that people are really finding help from him. And he said, Garth, what I tell them is that I am just how people used to be before all the technology. I just haven't changed maybe as much as the, you know, other people. And his story is actually really interesting because there was a lot more going on than that. But yeah, I think he is really good at remembering people's humanity, and people are not used to being treated like that on the daily, and just non-judgmental listening. To get back to Jane and I both come from counseling backgrounds. So, you know, that Rogerian sort of, that thing that underlies all good therapeutic alliances. So that's
the unconditional positive regard, right? That we all, and yeah, this is what's really cool too. To the 250th thing is, so when we looked at people's private trade-off priorities for what they mean by a successful life, what do kind of like they want to live, the number one trade-off priority is contribution. They actually want to do things that have a positive impact on other people. That's their private number one trade-off priority for successful life. In the top 10 for every single demographic was, I want to be involved in my community. And right now, that's the lowest achieved priority of any of the top priorities. In fact, more people reported being debt-free than involved in their communities at the level they wanted to. So
I've been thinking about this because so many people want to talk about federal politics or whatever the hot issue is today. These like really big level things that really we don't have as an individual citizen. We don't have a whole lot of choice over. But the question is, what are you doing in your neighborhood? What are you doing in your community to make a difference and to empower yourself and feel like you are making a contribution? And I think that I've got to get my mind around. That's kind of a new thought. I'm sure it's not a new thought, but it's a new thought for me. And what that does for people psychologically to be doing something like that.
Well, think about and so our hypothesis on this, and you'll see this because one of the tentpole things you're going to see coming off of this next year is this push to contribution. And literally, this is who we are. We want to use our gifts to improve our lives and the lives of others, and showcase that and make it central to our identity. And it's pretty remarkable. Just at the end of the day, if we get people to be able to see that we believe this, right? There's two hurdles. Well, I know I care about that privately. I don't think anyone else does. So I got to reveal and shatter that illusion. And so we've got massive narrative campaigns, all that kind of stuff. Okay. But then there's another obstacle, which is I don't know what to do. And so we have to create tons of opportunities for people to get engaged in their community. And the sort of hypothesis on this is I can't get to self-actualization without self-efficacy. And right now, I don't feel like I matter. I don't feel like anything I do will matter. So our ability to connect you to something you care about, to make a contribution, and to see all those millions and millions of contributions all over the country. So wait, this is who we are. I can't reveal too much, but there's going to be a massive concert series. It's just going to be ridiculously cool. I say that only because we have a small part to play. There's lots of really cool people doing amazing things, but I think that people will get that sense of self-efficacy again. Wait, I matter. We can solve problems in our communities, right? And I think that the more that we start to do that, I think that the indicator you're going to see rise, which has been stubbornly declining every generation for almost 100 years, is social trust. That as we reveal our shared values, our trust goes up in each other. As we engage in a common goal together, our trust goes up. And when trust starts to rise, that flywheel, so much more becomes possible when we start to trust one another again.
Yeah. Well, I am really looking forward to that. Not only that you guys, not only do I want you to pull it off, but I also want it to make that change in our communities and on our campuses. And so I hope there would be a way for, classrooms to get involved with these kinds of things, and for faculty to get on board and kind of help do what you guys are putting out there. That would be awesome. Well, any final thoughts, Todd, that you want to leave us with? Jane, any final questions?
I have no more questions, but just gratitude for the time you've spent with us.
Me too. I always love talking. So we'll do it again. Let's
good.
We'll come back and talk about the 250th. How's that?
That sounds fantastic. Todd Rose from Populace, thank you so much. And we will look forward to seeing all the good stuff you guys are working on. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, Garth here. Thanks for listening to Psych Sessions. If you could go to wherever you listen to our podcast and you would follow that podcast or like it, it really does help us as we are trying to get out to more teachers of psychology. Also, if you haven't checked out our website, please visit psychsessions.org and sign up for our monthly newsletter. We offer free resources and valuable news that you are going to want to know related to the teaching of psychology. Thanks.